Unsyndicated presents Shep and Sean, featuring Matt Shepard and Sean Baligian.
So glad you could join us wherever you may be this Thursday evening. The dulcet tones of Anti-Ghost. Are you familiar with those guys, Shep? Are you familiar with the work of Anti-Ghost?
A little bit. 4 really good albums. The 5th one coming out soon. Can't wait.
Did you like that? There you go. Toss that softball up there. I am so excited to do this for a myriad of reasons. You might remember last week, Shep and I, we were talking for a couple of weeks about talking to some of the people that made WDFN, and I don't think this is an overstatement, the cultural icon that it became. So many incredible memories over the last 30 years, and there is no way possible we could have this conversation. I'm already giggling, thinking in the back of my head some of the crazy things this guy did. But this guy, of course, kindly joining us. He had a front row seat. I'll let him tell the story. Literally before day one, he is Arthur J. Regner. Art, always a pleasure, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing well, Sean. Thank you. And Matt, great to see you guys. And I'm looking forward to it too. I can't believe it has been, 30 years ago. You know how it is when you get a little older here, you're starting to age. It seems like yesterday. And, that's how I feel about DFN. I mean, I can remember Lorna Gladstone calling me in my humble Ann Arbor abode and said, Dick Kernan said that I should talk to you. And I knew DFN was starting, and I had no idea. I was doing something else at the time, and so I said sure. So I went in and I talked to Lorna. I met her right away, and it was really weird. It was in the basement of the W4 building, which is right on Jefferson. As a matter of fact, it was on Jefferson where DFN eventually ended up being our garage studio, which I know you two guys are familiar with, is right behind the television sitcom Martin. Whenever they had the establishing shot, because Martin was a disc jockey from Detroit, that was his job. When they had the establishing shot of his apartment building where he lived, and then they would cut away into the apartment, I guess. The DFN studio was right behind that apartment, right behind it. And every time I saw Martin, it's still because I was not a big fan of that studio. We were supposed to be there for a year. Anyway, Lorna calls me. I go in and I interview with her, and I talk to her for about an hour and a half. And this is well before DFN gets started. As a matter of fact, this is we started in 94, I guess. So this is probably late November of 93. And a lot of people were interviewing at that time. And she interviewed me, and I knew she liked me. We got along, and we were talking about it. And I had been in Detroit radio for a long time. I had done everything from being a disc jockey, a reporter, talk show host, producer for Denny McLean and John McCullough. I went into TV, and I was producing there. So I knew a lot of people in Detroit, quite frankly. She was from Chicago. She did not know. So it was over, and I thought it was going well. And she immediately offered me the job of executive producer of the radio station. And I was floored. She asked me if I would take it. She quoted me a really good salary. And I immediately accepted. So she had other people in mind, but I was the first person ever hired by WDFN. That I know for a fact.
That's awesome.
And it was very, very odd because when I walked out, sitting like the next man standing or the next chair up was Jason Whitlock. Now, I don't know if you guys remember, but Jason Whitlock was a columnist for the Ann Arbor News, the newspaper back then. And I thought he was excellent. I thought he's a great writer. He played football, I think, at Ball State. He had an affinity for Michigan football, but he was a good, tough columnist. And I walked out, and I was all giddy because I had just gotten hired, and I was really, really excited about that. I wished him luck and all that. I didn't really know him. Until this day, I really don't know him. But a few weeks later, when Lorna was saying, well, I have this guy from Chicago, Rich Pimenko, she always wanted to hire Gregor or Greg Henson. And, I call him Gregor all the time. And, but she also told me that you have to interview these people first. I don't think Greg or Rich know this, but she said, if you don't like them, we won't hire them. So she really put a lot of trust and responsibility in me early on. She really, really did. And so, I immediately like Greg. I mean, and Pimenko, Rich is rich. I know a lot of people say, well, what about Rich Pimenko? He was very into the Chicago Bears, and it was all about the Bears. The old Saturday Night Live, with Norm from Cheers and all, the Bears, the Bears.
Yes.
He that stereotypical. He was really that way. And so I remember her saying, hey, well, what did you think about Jason Whitlock? And I said, I think that guy has some talent. And she was like, yeah, he has some talent, but there's something underneath that guy that I am not so sure. And she goes, so I don't know. I'll have to think about him. But she had in mind some people already. I interviewed Jamie. I interviewed Jennifer. They were both from Chicago at the time. Jamie was actually from California. And he had great pipes. I knew right away that, he was a talent. Jennifer, obviously, I knew she was a talent. She liked the Mega Man, Ike Griffin. I knew he was crazy. And you need that. I think the distinction that I knew being in radio and being in talk radio as to being a hardcore journalist or a reporter, is that you have to entertain. You're doing a show as opposed to writing a news story. If hopefully that makes sense. So I knew we needed people that were a little off center. She wanted Van Earl Wright, because he was on Channel 4. He was on TV, and Van Earl, great guy, crazy guy, was on Channel 4, and, bring in the thunder and all that kind of stuff he used to say on CNN headline news.
Yeah.
He was a national talent. The fabulous sports babe, at that time, she was really, really hot. And, we brought her in, and then Butch Stearns, which is really interesting. Arthur Butch Stearns, by the way. His first name's Arthur. I always call him Arthur. But she said, this is a guy, Lorna had crossed paths with him somehow. I don't know exactly how, but they knew each other. And she said, look, I want you to show this guy Detroit and show him a good time. And I want you to make sure that by the time he gets on the plane, he was working in some small market station in Minnesota at the time. She said, I want you to, just put a big sell on him because I would love him to work here. And I said, sure, no problem. So I showed Butch around. We drove around and all that kind of stuff. And then I took him to Guzzling Alley in Royal Oak, which is, had a great jukebox, and, we did some drinking. And he was plastered by the time he got on the plane. And I was probably feeling no pain, but I was drunk, so I wasn't completely polluted. And I remember driving back to the station, which at that time was the W4 building. It was still the WDFN garage studio was still being constructed. So I said, yeah, if it's up to this guy, I said, Lorna, I mean, he was, Butch was partying, and if you guys know Butch,
Yeah.
Butch a partier. He's a gregarious young man. And so, no sooner did he get off the plane that he called and accepted the job. So, so that was always pretty good. I still see Butch to this day doing very, very well, as a Fox television reporter anchor in Boston. And every time the Wings are in Boston, and if I'm traveling on that trip, I always try to hook up with good old Butchie boy. But, so we were starting to come together. Greg came in, Pimenko came in, and it was essentially the four of us, including Lorna, who then interviewed everybody for every position imaginable at WDFN. I mean, I just went through all kinds of people, Helena St. James, who now writes for the Free Press. She was working in Lansing, and she brought her portfolio in, and I could tell she was an excellent writer. And I told her, I said, look, you don't want a job here. you should be a reporter. You should be a writer. And this is probably not your kind of gig, you know? So I was a little more honest, especially more honest than Lorna wanted me to be, which really caused some major conflicts between me and her, a few months down the road after that.
Yeah. What's interesting is that you've mentioned so many people, and DFN did such a great job. Greg talked about it last time about getting after a certain Chicago sports broadcaster when he was on JR and taking some swipes at that. And it was funny for people. And yet you guys were hiring Chicago people too, and being run by Chicago people. So that was kind of an interesting twist to the whole thing when your sports directors walking around with Chicago Bears stuff. And then later on in life, you're ripping on a guy who's talking about the great city of Chicago.
Right. That was really interesting. You're talking about Chuck Swirsky. I mean, we might as well just get it out there. The thing about Chuck, and I knew him, and and WJR was the gold standard at that time.
Right.
I remember there were two sports talk shows that I distinctly remember. Obviously, Sports Rap with Frank Beckman, and then Skip Mackel and Dave Llewellyn did a show on CKLW, which is a sports show.
Yep.
Wow, yeah.
Yep.
And I listened to both of them. And I liked Skip Mackel. I thought he was pretty funny, and God rest his soul. I've always liked Davey Lou. How can you not? And I enjoyed that. But I also knew that I could do it. I knew that, I'd be a great talk show host. And you guys know, if you're in this business, as confident as you are, you're just as insecure. You know what I mean? You get waves, man. You get waves of emotion. You're like, hey, I'm the best. And then something, God, man, is this today my last day of work? So, I mean, that's just the way it is. That's the nature of the beast. And going back to Chuck, I remember walking in one time. I don't know where he was at. And I think it might have been Greg. I don't know if Greg told this story. If he did, you can stop me. But someone sent us a tape of him being the WJR sports director,
right,
talking and singing the praises of Chicago. Chicago's the greatest sports city in the world. And he kept saying it. And I know the host, who had a clue of what he was doing and saying and knew where he worked, was trying to say, well, but Detroit is, Detroit's right up there too. Anything good about Detroit? Say something freaking good about where you work.
In Chicago, because he's on the radio in Chicago doing an interview. That's what it is.
Right, exactly. But what they're also saying, it's kind of like, like I have like 3 cats. And when they go into a paper bag and turn around, I don't think you can see them. You know what I mean? And their butt sticking out with their tail. This guy realized, look, Chuck, this is just not going to be aired in Chicago. What you're saying right now has a shelf life forever.
Yeah.
And he kept giving him an out. He didn't do it. So we aired it in its entirety. And he was crucified for it, but we never edited it. That was purely, I don't know how long it was, a minute 30, whatever it was. But, that whole segment from beginning to end, him singing the praises of Chicago, we never touched it. We didn't have to touch it. We didn't have to edit it, and we don't edit stuff. That's
right. But so some of your Chicago-based folks, they didn't have a problem with it either. It's kind of my point. I mean,
right. Well, no, because they sent it to us. We probably wouldn't have known about it, or it eventually would have caught up to us somehow. But that Chuck Swirsky, if I remember correctly, and I wasn't in on this, the airing and deciding to do it.
Yeah, that was correct. Yeah.
They did it, and I'll be honest with you. See, this is where I'm a little different. I never really. And I know, considering what I did with the Lions, but I never really wanted to be a dickhead, or be cruel, or be mean, or make fun out of somebody. In Chuck's case, he kind of did it to himself, but then, of course, WDFN really piled on. And, I think essentially that, led to him, where did he go first? Toronto to the Raptors. And now I know he's doing very well in Chicago. So,
Let- Art, I want to ask you about a show that you did the first time I remember hearing you, as a matter of fact. And I don't know if you and I have ever talked about this before. I just thought it was so unique. Very quickly, let me tell you about our friends at Legacy Partners, though. Listen, did you know that thousands of Metro Detroiters have already called Legacy Partners to get help with their home and auto insurance? Our friends at Legacy Partners are one of Southeast Michigan's top independent insurance agents. They provide a full-service, one-stop solution for all of your insurance needs, personal and business, large and small. It's this simple. Call them, get a quote. They're going to hook you up because they've helped so many people out there by asking the right questions to get the right coverage put in place to properly protect you. Did I mention save you money as well? Chances are, if you haven't checked your policies, you're probably paying too much and you could be underinsured. Enter Legacy Partners. Give them a chance to help with your home, your cars, life insurance, Medicare enrollment, or your business insurance needs in general. Call them today, 586-209-4106, or visit legacypartnersins.com. Art Regner kindly joining us, the original at WDFN. I think I can say that. And Matt Shepard and I kindly being joined by him. Arthur, the Sunday afternoon sit-in. You and Steve Courtney, I think 24. Not only, two Livonia guys, Shep, no disrespect, two Livonia guys, which already had me in immediately, but you guys playing Beatles tunes on top of it, just awesome. Tell me how that came about.
well, that actually came about because Lorna would not let Greg Henson and I be on-air hosts or full-time on-air hosts because we both that's what we really wanted to do. So, but I was executive producer. Greg was associate executive producer, I think, and Pimenko was the sports director. And then Lorna was at the top. That was how it was. But she each gave us 2 hours on Sunday afternoon. And Greg and I got together and we decided, why don't we combine our shows? That means we're on the air for 4 hours. And I told Gregor that I had a concept for a show called the Sunday Afternoon Sit-In, because growing up when I did, sit-ins were very, very popular, protesting everything under the sun, including the Vietnam War. And there's always been, I'm a huge Beatles fan, always have loved the Beatles. And there's a song that I love, Tomorrow Never Knows, which I figured is a great opening for a talk show. So I told Greg, I brought a lava lamp in. I had this whole concept of how I was going to do this show. I wanted to create this environment because even though when you're on the radio, you focus in on the microphone and you focus like you're talking to one person and one person only. But I wanted to create this whole environment. I wanted the people listening to come with me. And, the opening lyrics, a song written by John Lennon, turn off your mind, relax, and float downstream. I figured, what better way to open up a talk show than that, man? Just like, hey, just let it hang out, man. Just be cool. And that's how the sit-in was born. Greg and I originally did that. Greg then moved on to full-time. I think he and Jamie or something, because we had some turnover there the first couple of years. I ended up doing the show with Steve Courtney for a while. I did that show with Jamie Morris. I did that show with Drew Henson's father, who taught me actually a lot about football. I did that show with JJ Grant. And then I did that show a lot by myself. But that is how the sit-in really was born. I sound like I'm pumping myself up, but that was from day one. When I was told I was going to do a 2-hour show and it was on Sunday afternoon, I immediately said, it's a Sunday afternoon sit-in. I have like 8 lava lamps here in this pretty messy office area. But, and I knew the song I was going to play, which was Tomorrow Never Knows. And, we had that whole concept. The thing was, what made that show really is that Greg and I used to, we had on Michigan linebacker Steve Morrison, I believe, who ended up running on railroad tracks and breaking his foot. But he was a really good player. We had him on for like an hour. We didn't know what the hell we were doing, And I remember Jim Schneider, the SID, assistant SID at Michigan said, sounded like a team meeting, really exciting stuff, and, but, we got better, obviously. And, it just so happened, and, this is, fate. We looked into it. We were on when after the Lions game. Greg was doing 2 to 4, and I was supposed to do 4 to 6. So we did 2 to 6 every Sunday afternoon sit-in. And it happened to be the Lions post-game show. And I think it was the first post-game show. I should have double-checked this, but they played Tampa Bay, who was then still in the Central Division, I think it was back then. And, Minnesota, Chicago, and Green Bay all had winning records against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers because they were a laughing stock. I mean, 15, 20 games above 500, which is a lot in football because you only play your division rivals, as we all know, twice a year. The Lions, on the other hand, were right around 500, but maybe a game under 500 in their own division. So I was and my whole thing with the Lions goes back to Sam Williams being my neighbor, Mr. Williams, and going to Franklin High School with him and working out with Wayne Walker and catching field goals from Wayne Walker at Franklin's football field. I mean, I have a history with the Lions that goes back to early childhood because they were real to me. They were real people because I knew them and they lived in my neighborhood. But anyway, I digress. They had lost to Tampa again in Tampa, I'm pretty sure. And so Greg is driving the show, and you guys know what this means. He's operating the board. So I'm just sitting there and I have the microphone and the headset on. So the guy who's not driving, it's pretty easy. All you do is, you have your research in front of you and you're talking and stuff, but you're not pumping all the, going up and down and, setting the levels and all that kind of stuff. And so, he goes, Art, what are we going to do about the Lions? I mean, geez, they lose to Tampa again. What is this team ever going to turn it around? And I looked at him and I was furious, just absolutely furious. And I said, Gregor, the Lions suck. They always have sucked and they always will suck. Well, then I figured, oh my God, because that was never really spoken quite that way on Detroit radio before. And I figured, and Greg looked at me and I figured, oh man, I just blew it. I mean, and he had a slow smile came to his face. And then it was no holds barred, man. We just let loose. And, that's how all the Lions ran that I do, which people still bring up to this day. And most of them, like all of them actually, because I react off the game. What I just saw, what just happened, we're all impromptu. I never scripted anything, but I will say there were times, depending on whomever my partner was, unless it was Greg, I would look at him and say, listen, you can put your headset on, you can even crack open your microphone, but you're not going to speak for 20 minutes at least. Because I was all fired up and then I would just go, and I was that way with the Red Wings too. But, I always had a philosophy as an on-air host that I love Michigan, always loved Michigan. I love the Red Wings, always going to love the Red Wings. I really kind of love the Tigers too. And I'm pleasantly surprised by the Pistons and I hate the Lions. That was like my creed. That was the persona that I was going to have on the air. And, and I think it worked, pretty well because the Lions, I'm still Lions free, which people don't quite understand what that means, but I just couldn't take it anymore. I mean, just decades upon decades upon decades of disappointment and never having anything really happen, 5-0 against Dallas, Earl McCullough dropping a sure touchdown pass from Greg Landry. I mean, just right in his hands, I mean, it all just kind of was just too much for me, just too much. And
well, the emotion's still alive. How did it transform into the Doctors with you and Terry Foster? Tell us how.
Well, that was something. Rob Parker had left for Newsday, and and Stoney and Wojo became a part.
I think he's
the
back.
original
I'm not
Terry
sure,
was the
but
Odd Couple,
yeah.
which Rob took that name again. I mean, he's doing the Odd Couple now. And so,
Very original guy.
yeah, yes. One of the originals was Rob Parker. And, I kind of looked at the way Lorna said, to go back to Jason Whitlock, make it all come full circle, that Rob Parker was Jason Whitlock liked. And, crazy, good, talented, all those things, but he wasn't as controversial. I think she was always afraid that Jason Whitlock was going to say anything. I don't know that. I haven't talked to Lorna in decades. So I don't know, but I just think the way Jason was compared to Rob. But Rob he went to Newsday, a very big daily newspaper out on Long Island, and was a columnist at the Estonian Wojo. So I really think that Lorna wanted to have, another show, another voice. And she liked Terry. She liked Terry's writing. And so she called me in, or Greg called me in, because Greg by that team had moved into more of a management role. I was out of management, and that's a long story that for another time. So I was just an on-air host and a reporter and all that kind of stuff, which is what I wanted to. And so they said, listen, we want to team you up to do a night show with Terry Foster. And I said, yeah, I know Terry. We were acquaintances, but we really didn't know each other that well. And I said, okay. She goes, but you're going to have to meet Terry. And if he doesn't like you, you're not on the show. That's what Lorna told me. You're not on it. We'll find somebody else to work with him. And, because Lorna hated me in a way. She loved me and hated me, but and I said, okay. So I met Terry at the big Southfield theater that might not be there anymore. Like 12 Mile and something, I don't know. But it was a big, big theater that had a nice restaurant and bar. And so I walk in and I meet Terry, and we're talking, and he tells me that he has this concept of where we solve people's problems. Like sports psychologist is what he wanted to do, that we would be psychologists. And, and somehow him or we thought, how about the sports doctors? And I liked the idea. I knew that we were going to get along. So that's how the sports doctors was born. I immediately went home and I wrote the open of the sports doctors, which has the siren and all that. Yeah. I had, my niece was Randy Smith, because she was like 5 years old at the time. And, Randy was a very young general manager, kind of similar to what we're going through now at the time. And a very young general manager. And Jennifer was, I forgot, she was somebody, Jennifer was doing some Lions thing. And then I send Steve to Boston to the All-Star game, because he wasn't on the ballot. So I had a writing campaign to, for Yzerman to be in, to go to the All-Star game, which is still really criminal. If anybody, I don't think there's been a superstar treated any worse than Steve Yzerman by the league and by Team Canada. But that's for another time too. And so we started doing the show, and it took off. And I remember Scotty Bowman said, hey, you got this radio show the guys are telling me about, meeting the players. And I said, yeah. He goes, who's your first guest? And I said, well, we haven't really thought that far, Scotty. And he goes, well, you've got a first guest now. And Scotty Bowman was our first guest. Again, I'm indebted to Scotty. I owe that man a lot. I think he's, I really do. Maybe we got him at the right time. If you read Ken Dryden's book, The Game, and talk to a few other players, they don't glow about him as a person per se. They love him as a coach because they all have Stanley Cup rings. But, Scotty, to me, he couldn't have treated me better. I just think he's a wonderful guy, a wonderful human being.
That's pretty cool, man. That's pretty cool. You don't find many athletes or coaches who say, yeah, bring me on. I want to be your guest. Yep. You just don't have it.
Art, I want to ask you, there are so many moments over the history that, like, iconic moments that people remember where they were. I want to get into a couple all-nighters that you pulled. I think you know what I'm talking about. One in particular, everybody knows where they were. But first, I want to tell you about my friends out here in my neck of the woods in Northville. Tell you about my friends doing a great job at the Wealth Advantage Group. The Handsome brothers right there And if you are ready to take charge of your financial future, look no further than the Wealth Advantage Group, located in historic downtown Northville, owned by those two handsome brothers with over 20 years of industry experience. They understand that your financial goals are as unique as you are. That's why they offer personalized expert guidance to help you navigate the complexities of financial planning. Now, whether you're saving for retirement, you're getting ready to sell your company, maybe you're already in retirement, doesn't matter. They can help guide you through every step of your financial journey. They work with clients through all stages of life and have clients in over 20 states. Investment world is a complex one, and if you're ready to start taking your finances more seriously, it might be time to work with the experts. Give my friends, the Wealth Advantage Group, a call at 248-773-8574 or view their website at www.thewealthadb.com. Arthur Regner kindly joining us here on Shep and Sean. Art, like so many other people out there, I found myself laying in bed at about 4 o'clock in the morning in 1997, completely unable, and I might add, unwilling to go to bed because you pulled an all-nighter after the Red Wings won their first Stanley Cup in 42 years. And let me start there. Did you know ahead of time that you were going to go all-nighter? Did you just say, this might be the greatest night of all our lives, I'm just going to keep rolling until I can't do it anymore?
Well, I had done a pregame show at Kobo Joe's where the fabulous sports babe showed up before leading up to Red Wing hockey. We didn't have the rights. And then I would do these in period shows. The thing that was weird, I was always at every game, but once the playoffs started, I was in the studio. I was never there because I was doing pre and post game shows. And I can remember when they were going to clinch the cup, Jamie Samuelson, Jamie came up to me and said, "Hey, look, man, this is just sucks. I mean, you should be there." I mean, I said, "You know what? I'm too superstitious. I'm going to go, I'm going to be in the studio. That's where I am. That's what's put this all together. I'm not going to ruin that. Just my luck that, the Red Wings end up blowing, this lead to Philly. I'm going to be in the studio." So I went up to Greg and Greg said to me, he goes, "Look, and if they win, you can go on for, 2-3 hours after, sign off at 2 or 3. And I told him, I said, "Greg," I said, "when a Detroit professional team wins a world championship of any kind, but wins a world championship," and essentially that's what the Stanley Cup is to me. Um, and we're a sports talk station. I am going to stay on. I am not going to hand it off to syndicated programming. I will not hand it off to anything syndicated. I will hand it off to another Detroit show, another live show from Detroit. Because if there's just one person that wants to call and talk about the Red Wings winning the Stanley Cup, we should be that outlet.
Right.
And, Gregor, because he knew I was serious, he said, "Yeah, sure, dude, whatever." Well, I don't think we actually really realized that it would turn into what it did. I was on all night. Marty Lapointe called 4 times, each time feeling more and more happy. Dropped a couple of F-bombs when I asked how heavy the cup was, and it was like, "I don't bleep it care how bleep it heavy it is. We bleeping one in our," and that was call 4. But all the guys, but virtually all the team, a lot of the guys called in during that. And I had fans who called in at, I don't know when they wanted, about 10:30 or something at night. I can't exactly remember if it was 8 o'clock start because it's national, between 11 and 12, I started. And, people would say, "Hey man, Art, you're still on." I woke up, or people would be on the whole time. I mean, it really did turn into a celebration. And I was really, really, touched by that. But what happened to me was the next show was on at 11 a.m. and it was called In the Paint, which is a basketball show hosted by Tim McCormick. Now, I knew Tim McCormick. I covered him. He's a great guy. I loved him at Michigan. I think his Michigan team won the NIT when it actually meant something. And so I really knew Tim, and I really enjoyed In the Paint. I listened to it every week, and I really liked him. And I can remember he came in, and, by at this time I had been on, all evening, and, adrenaline's still pumping, man. I'm just like, I could have probably gone on for days. And he walked in and he said to me, he goes, Art, he goes, I don't know if you know what you just did. He says, but on behalf of all Detroiters, all of them, I want to thank you for this. This was absolutely tremendous. I wasn't going for accolades or anything, but to come from Tim McCormick to tell me, this kid from, Livonia Franklin High School, who was just trying to find his way, but to come from somebody who I actually admired, who had accomplished a lot in the sporting worlds, for him to say that to me really made me feel good, really made me feel good. And then subsequently, in 98, I had to stay on again. I was a victim of my own success. Every time the Red Wings won, I was always working at a radio station. I would have to stay on until the next live programming came on, and so that's how it all came about, and again, I've got to, Greg Henson is a really good programmer and he gets it. And I think he understood his talent. And I think he, which I say loosely about myself, but he understood when we wanted to do something or we were gung ho to do it, that he would let us do it. He would let us try. And, there was no way I was ever going off the air when they won the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, he was a really good boss. People, I think, view him in a certain way. Those who know him understand that he allowed people to do their jobs. He was tough on you, but that's always a good thing, I think, because the expectation was there. When did you, we asked this of Greg last time, when did you recognize that station had a special feel to it because of the people and because of the reaction from fans? When did it suddenly hit you?
I think I knew it always had potential. And I think when it hit me was when we were on the air for about a month. The Lions were playing a preseason game and we all went to the game. And then after the game, we met up at, I think it's still around. I can't remember the place, but it's not in Pontiac, but it's on that side of town where like Telegraph and like three cities all merge right there. A big hospital's out there. It's in Pontiac, but it could be in Bloomfield or whatever,
Sure.
the borders
Sure.
are.
Are you talking about Duckies?
I can't remember. It's a nice place. It's a really nice place. It's pretty
Then
large.
it's not Duckies. Then it's not Duckies.
And I can remember after it was, we were all feeling good about ourselves, but we were all a group. We were all there together. And we went out into the parking lot to exchange ideas. And we were all sitting there in this parking lot and just talking. And I remember looking and I could see that there was a vibe that we all had. We all understood that when we cracked open a microphone, we weren't speaking just for ourselves. We were speaking for every single person that worked at that station. And that we knew when we were going to do crossovers or all that, we wanted to continue the conversation, have a continuation of the conversation throughout the day. No matter what Butch and Larry were talking about, the sports babe, I mean, she did her own thing. And then, VE, and then, Parker, and then the Mega Man and all that kind of stuff. We tried to create an atmosphere where it was very inviting and letting you in. And we were successful. And the reason we were successful is because we liked each other. We understood each other and we did really respect one another. And we knew that, this job is more than cracking open a microphone and talking. And most of us were trained in journalism. Most of us were reporters. We know the 5 W's and an H. We know, objectivity, even though good old Pat Caputo, the king of objectivity, until you bring up Michigan State. Sorry, Pat, I had to throw that at you. But I'm just saying that we kind of understood, we had the fundamentals down, but we also understood radio where it had to be an entertainment medium. You could be your personality, so I think that's when I knew was how well we got along as a staff, knowing that we would be able to create a sound and a vibe that people would be able to identify with. Hopefully that answers your question, man.
Art Regner, two things very quickly. I know Nick and a couple people have asked about Mega Man. I know that there were some health issues. Have you heard anything on Ike? Is Ike doing better? Have you kept in contact with him, Art? Just people are asking, so I wanted to ask you.
Yes, Ike Griffin, the Mega Man. I used to, he lived right down the street from DFN.
Mm-hmm.
And, I can't tell you how many nights, more than I can actually remember, I would go down there after his show and just hang out with the Mega Man. I got along very, very well with Ike. And we're still buddies till this day. Yeah, he had health issue. I think it was, I hate to say it because I'm not 100%, like a massive stroke, and virtually had to redo or relearn how to do almost everything again. And, but today I'm happy to say that Ike is, doing his thing. He's recovered, and I stay in contact with him. When I post about the Griffins, the Grand Rapids Griffins, because I'm covering them kind of now during their playoff run, I'll write Griffins win or Griffins this, and Ike always posts Griffins always win. So, so yeah, so Ike got, he's gone through a lot. When he left DFN, it was not under the best of terms. And but Ike's a good guy. I always liked him. He I always recognized his talent. And the one thing about Ike I always used to tell him is Ike, you've got the rap down, the personality down aspect of being a talk show host, of a radio show host. Hey, we're underwater tonight, all that kind of stuff that he used to do. But there comes a point where if that's all you're bringing, you're not going to be successful. You've got to now fill it in with information. Always try to freshen it up. Always be topical. I know play the hits are what people are talking about, but you just can't say, hey, man, baby, and, I think he understood that. And, and I think that, because when you were in my position, I would have to take people that were my friends, and tell them, hey, I love you like a brother or a sister, but it's not happening. You got to get better, and that was probably the toughest aspect of anything I ever did. And the best thing I ever did, I don't know how much time we have, and you guys just can tell me to shut up. But the best thing that
I don't think that's possible. I don't think that's possible.
Rolling, Arthur.
Well, I'm wound up now. But the best thing that I ever did was hire Don Swindell. Swindell, 100%.
He was a
so
magician.
creative.
Yeah,
So
that guy was a magician.
Right, was my hire.
Underrated part of the station by far, perhaps the most underrated. One of the most talented individuals we've ever worked with.
Arthur, I want to go back to something you just said, because as God is my witness, Shep and I had this conversation today. Sadly, in the history of a station, sometimes you get to a point where, I don't know, you're having too much success. I don't know what the excuse is. You'd have to ask others. I never understood why people wouldn't want to do things. Hey, there's an appearance. Hey, there's a post-game show. Hey, and for so many people, it was like asking, okay, can I pull your tooth to do extra? And that never made sense to me. And Shep, you may not know this. Arthur and I happened to be at the radio station at about 10:30 one night. We were doing a little something called FOD that maybe we can save that for a different day, Art.
All right. Definitely.
Shep, I'm the brand new guy. I'm literally the brand new guy. And all of a sudden it comes down that Barry Sanders is going to retire. Barry Sanders is going to retire. Arthur immediately picks up the phone and calls Greg and said, can we go on? Greg said, absolutely. Okay. Art looks at me. Sean, do you want to go all night? Are you kidding me? Does a bear shit in the woods? There was no place I'd rather be. I'm the kid at the station. I'm with Art. We get to talk about one of the biggest moments of our lifetime. I mean, arguably the greatest superstar. And I say that with respect to Mr. Howe and Mr. Yzerman, Mr. Cobb, so many things. But that dude just upped and walked away. And Arthur, you had the sense about it to immediately call Greg and say, all right, let's go 10:45 till 6 a.m. Shep, I'm telling you, that night, There was no place I'd rather be, Arthur. That was a blast working with you.
Well, right. You know what? Well, we were doing something, and I think we might have been on the air, Sean, because I think we just signed off and handed it to, I don't know, that show from Washington, D.C. I forget what those guys were called now. Meat Puppets or no. That was
Chicken dinner. What were those guys? Yeah, they'd always say winner, chicken dinner.
Yeah, whatever. The guys from D.C., some syndicated show. I mean, they weren't bad, but we had gotten off, and then it came over.
Yeah.
And I knew that we had to go right back on the air, and I called Gregory, Sean, I knew you'd be up for it. And we went on, and, and I remember again, I was just pissed, Barry's walking away. And, until this day, I blame the Lions for that. I blame the Lions for Barry retiring early. He played 10 years, and you know what was really bad? Because back then, ladies and gentlemen, being the best rusher, the best runner in football was it. It wasn't the quarterback. It wasn't the wide receivers. It's a completely different game now. But in football, man sport, snot coming out of your nose. Give me the ball. I'm just going to run it through the line, And Barry was on the verge of breaking Jim Brown's record as the all-time leading rusher, which was the record to have. God, I love Johnny Unitas and all those guys, 19,000 yards passing or whatever, all that kind of stuff is great. But that rushing title, and finally, long-suffering Lion fans were going to have something that they could call their own, where they could run through the airport like O.J. Simpson in those
Davis
commercials and say, I'm a Lions fan and I love it. I love the Lions because of what Barry was just about to do.
Yeah.
And he walked away.
Yeah.
He walked away because he couldn't take another year of, let's be honest. Yeah, they were the worst franchise in the history of sport. And,
I think it was Walter Payton's record though, not Jim Brown.
Yeah. Jim Brown, and you know what? I'm obsessed with
Chicago. You're obsessed with
not Chicago, but Barry's dad. Because Barry's dad was always, Barry's good. But Jim Brown's
You're right.
best.
Yep.
So, but he was going to break it. He was definitely going to break it.
Oh yeah, look, that was a big deal for people in Detroit because, like you said, that was something that we could have held to our bosom. That is what we wanted. Our football team may suck, but we've got the greatest running back in the history of the sport, and I still think we do.
I do too.
Yeah, but I think we wanted it more than Barry wanted it, to be honest with you.
Well, right. Well, I was working at Channel 2, producer of the Eli and Denny show, and was a sports producer. And it was when they were in Washington in the national championship, I still got, I don't know about you guys, but I bought like over $8,000 worth of Michigan paraphernalia, all the same T-shirt that says national champion, but, or just variations of that. But they were going to play in the NFC championship game. And, in Washington, it was in Washington. And I can remember, this is real quickly, but, and then I'll get to Barry. We land and I have my suitcase and, the guy at the airport is hailing a taxi for me. He goes, where are you from? And I said, oh, I'm from Detroit. And he, cause that's the big championship game. It's like, we arrived 3 or 4 days later. He goes, oh man, we're going to kick your ass. We're going to kick your ass. And I said, yeah, I know. And he looked at me and he goes, let me ask you something. He goes, why are all you people, from Detroit? I'd say that to everybody from Detroit. I always say that to out of town fans, they'll put up a fight, but everybody here, you Lions fans are all saying, yeah, it's going to happen. I said, buddy, if you want to, talk about Red Wings or Pistons or Tigers, you'll get yourself a fight, and I'm sure I threw in Michigan as well. I said, but when you're talking to Lions, Justin Bain here is amazing. Is absolutely amazing. So, yeah, I mean, I don't expect him to win. And of course, they did not win. And that year, they started the season on Labor Day weekend and lost in Washington 40-0, where at the very end of the game, Washington had first and goal at like the Detroit 1-inch line. You guys remember this, right? Yeah. And they took a knee. Yeah. And Chris Spielman was so incensed that he's motioning to the Washington bench. Like, come on, let's play. And Washington's like, hey, it's 40-0. We got 6 seconds left. We're not going to run a play, But he was just because that's how into it. That's why I love Chris Spielman. He was going to play till the whistle, till the gun fired and the game was over. And then they essentially lost, I don't know, what was it, 48-17 or something like that.
Yeah,
But
it was like
I remember we were staying at the Lions Hotel. And, so I'm kind of running late as usual. And I run into the elevator. I'm not looking, and the door closes, and it's me and Barry Sanders. And, I forgot my itinerary. I didn't know, I was all disheveled. I didn't know what the hell was going on. And I go, hey, Barry, how are you? He goes, I'm good. I'm good. How are you? And I said, yeah, I'm good. I said, I go, hey, what time is practice? Do you know? Do you have any idea? And he looked at me. I don't think he knew my name, actually. He said, buddy, he goes, I never look at anything. They tell me what time to get on the bus, what time to be in the locker room, and what time the game starts, and what time to get on the bus to go home, and what time to get on the plane to go home. That's all I know, and that's all I care. And I just started to laugh. And I thought to myself, he was very, as you said, unassuming. He, and I remember that because when he walked away, you're right. He had it, he had it. It was over and he could live with it. Sean, you'll like this. I told Mike Bossy, who I still think is probably maybe the greatest goal scorer of all time.
Yes.
Just one of them, and I remember interviewing him on the air. And I told him, I said, the day you announced your retirement, I practically broke down and cried. And then he looked at me and he said, well, you're the only one, because I certainly did. And so I just think that we're so engaged as fans and, as talk show hosts or whatever in this medium and in sports that we sometimes forget that they're human beings. They have lives outside of their sport, and they have a lot of things going on that we don't know about. And when they make a decision, unless it's injury related, and let's be honest, a lot of guys do not retire under their own terms because a lot of them have to because their poor body breaks down because of the viciousness of being a professional athlete. But when they say they're done, they're done. They're done. I mean, you're not going to talk them out of it.
Ask Andrew Luck. Guys, I think when Barry's last interview, I had a Lions show at the main event at the Silverdome. You guys remember the main event?
Oh yeah. Oh
And
yeah.
It was the last show of the year. Barry was my last guest. And his son's running around with my oldest boy, and they were playing football in an empty main event while we did this radio show. And that was the last time he did an interview with us, and then he retired soon thereafter. So I can relate to being stunned by all that stuff and thinking, oh my God, I can't believe the best player I've ever seen. Jerry Rice is in that conversation. Lawrence Taylor's in that conversation. Best players ever is walking away now, knowing he still has something left in it.
Oh yeah. Well, I told Nick, I still tell Nick, listen, if Mrs. Illich was supposed to come to you and said, you don't even really have to play, but I'll give you a signed blank check if you will just sit on our bench. Just sit there. And just having that other team know there is a possibility that you can quarterback the power play. Would you do it? And he says, well, if it's a blank check, maybe I actually would think about it. But but my point being is that these fellas, I'll tell you, Sean, you and Eric paid on the third shift. Didn't you have Grant Hill when that whole trade came down?
He drove down to the station. It was unbelievable. He just drove down to the station, banged down the door. And it was funny because he said there was somebody young there, and I don't remember who, but he said, hi, this is Grant Hill. Can I go in with Sean and Eric? Like really? I mean, that's exactly how it happened, Art. It was phenomenal. But that was
I never heard that.
Yeah, true story. True story.
Oh yeah.
Completely unannounced, Shep. Good memory, Art. He just showed up and said, I want to talk to the guys on the station. And well, he knew everything about us too. It was kind of funny.
So
Right,
that's
we were
that's
having
really unique. That is
we
so
were having one of
unique.
our anniversary parties, the DFN, which the first couple were at the main event, by the way, there, Shep.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And we were having an anniversary party, which, Sean and Eric were going to come to after their shift was over, the third shift, by the way. But and we're sitting there, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Eric and Sean are talking to Grant Hill.
Yep.
Yeah, it was amazing. But that's what I've always said. What we do for a living beats working for a living, because it's fluid, it keeps you young. I knew very, very early on in my life that, I did not have the discipline or the attention span to be an engineer or a 9 to 5 person. And I love those people. We need them. I knew that I could not be a conventional worker.
Yeah, but it's so unique, Art. I mean, that just that wouldn't happen today. At least I don't think in the Detroit market. I just don't think a player would go down, knock on the door. Hey, can I go on with Sean and Eric? Call in on an all-night celebration of a talk show, players over and over and over again. I thought it was unique. I thought it was special, but eventually it changed. So when did it change? When did it switch and it stopped being the fan?
I think what really happened is that after a while, with the evolution of social media, and I do think when radio was, before, when I first got in, you could have 7 O&Os, meaning you could own a combination of 7 radio stations, television stations, and newspapers, just 7 of them all over the country. That was it.
Right.
You couldn't own 2 in the same place, in the same market. That's why the Detroit News and the Washington Post switched television stations, because the News owned Channel 4. And the first year, I don't know how many people know this, but the first year of Saturday Night Live, the News refused to carry it. So it wasn't on in Detroit the first half season, because the News did not carry it. The second half, because an affiliate in Detroit, Channel 50, picked it up, and then they switched stations. And Saturday Night Live was, once the Washington Post owned Channel 4, or Graham Media, Catherine Graham, whatever, but that's the Washington Post. That was when it changed. And so then when it was deregulated, where Clear Channel came in, you could own 2,500 stations and everything became homogenized, where everything was, we were all in the one building. Remember in the beginning, okay, we have 8 stations here in Detroit. We had 8 promotions departments. We had 8 sales staffs. We had 8, all this. Well, the air staff pretty much stayed the same, because they were all different, different types of radio or different types of format. But everything, suddenly we had one big, huge promotion staff.
Yeah.
I mean, everything was starting to be cut down. Resources were limited. They realized that it became more of and I'm not saying this is a bad word, but it became more of a corporate mentality. A lot of people that had MBAs, that weren't communications majors or anything, did not know anything about the medium per se, started to run it and make decisions. That's very prevalent today. And so you don't have those. So I think that started to change. And I also think with the evolution of social media, athletes don't need to go on a podcast unless they really want to. They can do their own.
That's true.
They can post their own stuff. They can say, hey,
Yep.
yeah, you might have heard that, hi, I'm Javi Baez. I was picked off second base yesterday in a double play where the ball was hit the shortstop. But let me explain exactly why that happened.
Well, in fairness, it wasn't a double play, but it did ruin the 10th inning.
No, whatever. You know what I mean? I only heard about it. I was not listening to the game. I was in actually the DIA. So but I'm saying that they can defend it. They have their own outlets now. They have their own social media pages. They're not as dependent on us as they used to.
Yep.
Yeah, but
I want to ask you, I'm a firm believer, like when you left, correct me if I'm wrong, fall of 2002, you had to go. Like it was time for you to move on. I think that's a fair statement. If you disagree, you can go right ahead. I think you had built yourself to a point where it was time to take on something bigger. So I wasn't surprised when you left. how difficult was that decision though? Because that was your baby. That was your baby for 8 years. You were there. From the earliest moment, from conception, for goodness sake. Number one, did you realize, okay, it's time to go? And number two, how difficult of a decision was that for you?
You know, the difficult decision was leaving the people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that was the difficult decision. Leaving the job and leaving Terry as my partner. I was best man at his wedding. I am, godfather to his daughter. Celine, whom of course I called Art Regner. That was the difficult. I made a lot of friends. I liked a lot of people. And if you really look at it, once I left for XYT, there was an exodus to XYT. Pat came over, Terry came over. A lot of people started to go, but you're absolutely right, Sean. I was never going to go any further at DFN than where I was. They offered me a spot on the Red Wing Radio Network. I was going to do, first it was mid-afternoons with Doug Karsh, whom, I knew from his days at Ann Arbor. I love Doug. Has he ever called a Michigan loss in football yet? I don't think so. No, I know he has at least one, but I'm just saying that it was time. I was being paid nothing, virtually nothing. And when I got my first paycheck from XYT, it was a very humbling experience for me because my take-home pay, just take-home pay, this is after taxes, was what I would have made in almost 2 months at DFN.
Wow.
And that was my first check only. So, So did you do it for the money? I did it because I deserved it. I was talented enough, and it was about time I got paid for my talent. That was really where I was coming from, and the Red Wings. I mean,
that in part right there tells you why it probably in the end failed too, with its inability. I mean, Greg told us something last week that blew my mind. They billed $10 million once, and Greg said he knew that's one of his proudest moments when they were actually able to do that at DFN. But we had the discussion, and Sean went in and talked to people. I went in and talked to people. Other people we worked with, they wanted to switch them to the FM dial and didn't. That was a big reason too. I think that people eventually left. I would ask.
You're right.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I had this moment. Now, I don't know if you guys were there or not. We used to have these weekly or monthly station meetings at Dunleavy's upstairs. And every month they would tell us how great we were doing, how great we were selling. The sales managers would get up. They would say, hey, great job and all that kind of stuff. And so after about 7 or 8 months of these meetings, I raised my hand and I stood up, and because our facilities were, I guess were a crap hole. They were a crap hole. We were told we were going to stay there a year. And, when I left, we were still there. And, the furniture I bought was warranted for a year because that's where we were supposed to stay. But there was actually almost all the original stuff held up. But my point being is I got up and I said, Peter Connolly, I said, Peter, you tell us how great you're doing. And then I mentioned all the sales staff. And I said, and that's great. That's great. But still, and then I pointed to where the building was. I say, but we still work in a crap hole. But I didn't say crap.
It was a shit hole. It was a garage, and that
exactly. And I said, yeah, we're still doing, and they kept promising, one thing in this, and I know we've all been down this road, we get a lot of false promises. People tell us all kinds of things that are going to happen, and 9 out of 10 never happen. And one of them was, when are you going to get us out of that building? You've been promising us for years. When are you going to get out of that building? And, and Peter Connolly was like, they were stunned. And, but I didn't care. I had it, and I was just going to speak my piece. And I remember afterwards, I talking to Stoney and Wojo, and I go, okay, I just said the magic words. They're going to hate me and all that. But, they said, no, you're actually kind of right. And I always felt, if I'm kind of right,
Kind of right. What do you mean
What?
kind of right? What do you mean
Oh,
kind of right?
oh,
How
no,
about
no, no,
Say it.
Hey,
Say
how
it.
about how about
where was my
somebody else
backup?
stepping up back and
Man.
forth and saying, you know what? Good for you, Art. Thanks for doing that. Or standing up while you're doing it and saying, here. Why aren't you
Right.
doing something? Give me a
But
break.
it never happened. Honestly, God, man.
Right.
And it was like, where's my backup on this? I would go into
Exactly.
meetings. I would go into meetings, management meetings, where I would be with some of my colleagues. I'm not, I don't want to sound bitter. I say, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to do that. Okay, there. This is, and everyone was on the same page. Well, because of me, and once I get going, is this is proving I can't shut up. I would start talking, and then I would get myself all fired up, and I would keep talking and talking and talking. And then I would look back at these people who were all in agreement with me, and they were basically looking at their hands.
Right.
Exactly.
Chef,
know?
I remember this. Art, honest to goodness, that's why I was going crazy. I had a particular weasel in my ear about something all week. And if you bring it up, I promise you there are 3 guys that are going to jump in. All you have to do, you get fired up, and maybe it's a Lavoni thing. You'll get fired up, and we're going to bring it up. So I brought something up in a meeting, and honest to God, everybody went like this. And Shep, I hope you remember this. I literally looked at that guy, and I go, you are such a coward. Because everybody was sitting there mad at me, like, where did this come from?
Right.
He's a malcontent. And the 3 people that were irking me on to say something were all twiddling their thumbs exactly what you said. It was so infuriating.
Oh, yeah. I mean, for me, and I think what's good is that, I'm emotional. I let it out, but I don't hold a grudge. Really, I truly don't. I said my piece. Let's move on and let's try to make it better, or fire me or whatever. But this has got to stop. It can't go on this any longer. I could not sit through, going back to my original point, I could not sit through another meeting where they're telling us how much money we're making. I'm not seeing any of it. And we're certainly still working in inferior conditions.
Fair enough.
All right. We got to get out of here. Art, tell everybody what you're doing. I mean, I'm sure everybody is aware, but you are living a dream. There's no other way to say that. I'll let you explain it to everybody, Arthur.
Well, I like to say that I went from being a defense attorney to a prosecuting attorney, or vice versa, no matter how you view it. I saw the change in our medium. I saw that our industry, unfortunately, shrinking. There's more good people that are unemployed in Detroit radio than are employed. And I love it. I mean, radio has been and always will be my first love. But I had an opportunity to go work for the Red Wings, and it was covering the team, along with Dana Wakiji, who was also a DFNer. And, and I took the job. They offered me the job, and I took it. I traveled with the team, mostly kind of like Dana's backup. But what happened was Pete Skorich, who I know you guys know, was the vice president of entertainment services, and they immediately had me do a podcast. What the original description of the job and what I ended up doing is completely different. Live streaming, podcasting. I still write features. So I'm actually working for the team. And for me, and this is why I really am living the dream. Ken Holland, great guy, one of the best people you're ever going to meet. If he had to leave and not run the Red Wings anymore, he'll kill me for saying this. It couldn't have got any better for me than Steve Yzerman running the team. Because I like Steve. I like him as a person. I think he's a great guy, but I understand him. He's no nonsense. He's focused, and all he wants to do is win. And I've told him this. I used to always love watching him when the play was on the other side of the ice or away from him, because and Mickey, I'm sure Mickey Redmond loves this too, because he was dishing out those BC two-handers. Trust me, he was not lovey-dovey player out there. I mean, he was one tough SOB, and so to see Steve and to see what he's done with the Red Wings, how he's turning it around, the situation that he inherited from Kenny was not the best, but he's got the draft in order now. And, slowly but surely they're making strides. And as I said, when the day he was hired, which was April 19th, 2019, number 19 comes home, which was also Good Friday. I don't know if that's divine intervention or not, but I remember people saying to me, well, how do you think he's going to do? I said, if they don't win a Stanley Cup, he's going to die trying, and he's going to take us all with him. Because that's Steve Yzerman to a T. And, there's not many people that I've known that I have respect for. And, and I like to, bust his chops, and he likes to give it back, and, that's part of it too. I enjoy conversing with him because he allows me to be a nutbag at times. And I certainly appreciate that.
That's great.
Arthur, it was great catching up with you.
Arthur.
It was great in my last radio job. I was happy to call you. You've done such a tremendous job for so many years. And like I said, I think when people tell the story of WDFN in recent years, they're kind of looking in different directions. And that's one thing Shep and I wanted to do. We wanted to give credit where it's due, and you were number one. There's no doubt about that. And we appreciate you taking the time. Part
Thank you
2,
very
3,
much.
4,
I just want to say this because he passed away. We're going to try to do something, but I guarantee you, we would not be here today if it was not for Don Swindell and Phil Lamka, who had the vision to start this station, number one. Because he was happy at W4 being their general manager. He took 1130, which was WCXI, which was like a country station too, decided to make it a sports talk station. So there's Phil Lamka and obviously Don Swindell. They were essential to our success and why DFN became what it did. And also, I have to give a shout out because she's my hero. Sabrina Black was the best. Absolutely the best.
Just a sweetheart. No doubt about that.
Well
Art,
said.
always a pleasure. Shep, always a pleasure. Before we get out of here, I thank both of those guys. Let me tell you about Lindsay Broadwell. We really appreciate Lindsay being a part of this. And when it's time to buy, sell, doesn't matter. You need to contact the right agent. There she is, Lindsay Broadwell. Your house is probably the biggest investment you will ever make, and that's why you need a pro. Lindsay grew up on the mean streets of Northville and has expanded her team all over Southeast Michigan. She's an expert in all facets of the business. Now, when it's time to move, our friend Lindsay and her team will make sure you get the most out of your house and everything goes smoothly when finding your new home. Buyers, sellers, first-time buyers, doesn't matter. Make sure you contact Lindsay at BroadwellHomes.com. She will help you with everything from start to close. Licensed realtor at Real Broker LLC. Start your search today at BroadwellHomes.com. Arthur, thank you. Shep, thank you. Most importantly, thank you for checking out. We'll talk to somebody new next week. We'll probably check back in with about 8 different parts with Art. He's always an entertaining chat. Take care.
Guys.
Shep and Sean, featuring Matt Shepard and Sean Baligian. Produced by Todd Losey and Blake Matcherzak. Executive produced by Sean Baligian and Todd Losey. Theme song, incidental music, and related sound effects are from Still Alive by Anti-Ghost. Engineering, mixing, and graphic design support provided by the Unsyndicated Podcast team. Don't forget to like and subscribe on all your favorite channels. While you're there, be sure to rate and review the podcast. Call the Unsyndicated hotline at 248-237-3257.